The desert wind howled like a wounded animal, whipping sand across the cracked asphalt of Route 17, where the sun hung low and merciless, painting the horizon in blood-red streaks. In the shadow of a derelict gas station, its pumps rusted skeletons against the fading light. A young girl huddled against the wall. She couldn't have been more than 12, her clothes torn and dust-caked, eyes wide with the kind of terror that etches lines into a child's face too soon. Sophia, that was her name, though she whispered it to herself like a secret talisman, clutched a frayed backpack, the last remnant of a life upended. Hours earlier, she'd slipped away from the foster home in the nearby town of Dusthaven, driven by whispers of a father she'd never known, a man whose shadow loomed larger in stories than in memory. But the road had turned cruel. A group of roughnecks from the local mill had spotted her wandering, their laughter coarse as gravel, cornering her here with threats that hung heavy in the air like exhaust fumes. She pressed her back harder against the peeling paint, heart pounding in rhythm with the distant rumble of thunder, or was it engines? The men advanced, one of them cracking his knuckles, his shadow stretching long and predatory. "Lost your way, kid. We can give you a ride. Straight to hell if you don't hand over that bag." Sophia's breath came in shallow gasps, the metallic tang of fear on her tongue, mingling with the acrid scent of spilled oil from the station's forgotten lot. She scanned the empty expanse, the cacti standing sentinel like silent witnesses. But no help came. Not from the sky, not from the ground, until the horizon shattered. It started as a low growl, vibrating through the earth like the pulse of some ancient beast awakening. Then, the roar, unmistakable, thunderous, as a convoy of motorcycles crested the rise, their chrome gleaming like polished blades under the dying sun. 50 strong, maybe more, they rolled in formation, a steel river cutting through the dust. Leather-clad riders, bandanas whipping in the wind, engines snarling in unison. At their head was Ethan, a man forged in the fires of forgotten wars and harder roads, his broad shoulders hunched over the handlebars of his vintage Harley, the one he'd rebuilt with his own scarred hands. 48 now, Ethan's face was a map of lines etched by loss. A wife taken too soon by illness, a brother lost to the sands of a distant conflict, and a promise he'd buried deep, like a seed in barren soil. He rode with the Iron Vow crew, a brotherhood bound not by blood, but by oaths sworn under starlit skies, promises to protect the vulnerable, to stand against the shadows that preyed on the weak. The roughnecks froze, their bravado crumbling like dry clay as the bikes encircled the gas station. Engines idling to a menacing purr. Dust clouds settled slowly, revealing the riders' faces. Hardened men and women. Tattoos telling tales of redemption, eyes sharp as switchblades. Ethan killed his engine first, the silence that followed heavier than the roar. He swung off his bike, boots crunching on gravel, his helmet tucked under one arm. It was weathered black leather, scarred from 1,000 miles, with a faded inscription on the side, "Sophia, my light." A name he'd etched there 20 years ago, in a moment of naive hope before life tore it all apart. One of the roughnecks stepped forward, feigning toughness. "This ain't your business, biker. Move along." But Ethan's gaze, steady and unyielding, pinned him like a nail. "When a kid's in trouble, it becomes everyone's business." His voice was gravel-low, carrying the weight of unspoken storms. The crew fanned out, a wall of solidarity, hands resting on handlebars but ready for more. The leader of the thugs sneered, but his eyes darted, cowardice flickering. Sophia, from her corner, watched transfixed, the name on the helmet hitting her like a freight train. "Sophia," she murmured, then louder, rising to her feet on trembling legs. That's my name." Ethan turned, his world tilting in that instant. The girl stepped into the light, her face a mirror of the woman he'd loved, the same wide eyes, the same determined set to her jaw. Time fractured. Memories flooded back. The hospital room where he'd held his newborn daughter for mere minutes before duty called him away to war. The letter he'd written promising to return, the years of silence when he couldn't. He'd searched. Oh, how he'd searched. But the system had swallowed her whole, labeling him unfit, a drifter on two wheels. And now, here she was, calling out the impossible. "Dad!" The word escaped her lips, fragile as a desert bloom, but it cracked him open. Ethan's helmet slipped from his grasp, clattering to the ground. He staggered back a step, the crew exchanging glances, sensing the shift in the air, like the calm before a sandstorm. His knees buckled, and he sank to one knee, not from weakness, but from the avalanche of emotion crashing through him. Tears carved tracks through the dust on his cheeks, unseen by most, but felt by all. The roughnecks muttered excuses, slinking away into the twilight, their threats dissolving like smoke. But Ethan didn't see them. All he saw was Sophia, bridging the chasm of lost years with a single word. She rushed forward, hesitant at first, then enveloping him in a hug that smelled of fear and faint wildflowers. The crew watched in reverent silence, engines ticking as they cooled, the desert wind whispering approval. Ethan held her close, his massive frame shaking, the promise he'd forgotten reignited in that embrace. "I never stopped looking," he whispered, voice breaking. "I swore I'd find you." Sophia pulled back, searching his eyes. "Then why'd you leave?" The question hung, raw and unanswered, but in that moment it bound them. A thread of redemption pulling taut. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the convoy, Ethan rose, helping Sophia to her feet. The crew revved their engines in solidarity, a chorus of loyalty that echoed across the empty road. This wasn't just a rescue, it was the spark of something larger, a father's oath reborn, drawing them all into a ride that would test bonds forged in fire. Little did they know, the shadows of Dusthaven hid deeper threats, corrupt officials who'd buried the truth of her disappearance, weaving a web of lies that demanded justice. But for now, under the emerging stars, father and daughter stood together, the first step on a path of healing and reckoning. The night air cooled, carrying the scent of sagebrush and freedom. Ethan placed his helmet on her head, the name Sophia catching the moonlight. "Ride with me," he said, and she nodded, climbing onto the bike behind him. The convoy formed up, headlights piercing the dark like beacons of hope. As they thundered away from the gas station, the roar drowned out the past, promising a future reclaimed, 1 mile at a time. The convoy sliced through the velvet black of the desert night, headlights carving golden paths across the endless ribbon of Route 17. Engines throbbed like the heartbeat of a colossal machine, the rumble vibrating up through Sophia's bones as she clung to Ethan's waist, her small hands fisted in the worn leather of his jacket. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the sharp bite of cool air laced with the faint, oily tang of exhaust. Behind them, the Iron Vow riders formed a protective phalanx, their bikes weaving in a disciplined rhythm, shadows merging into one unbreakable line. Sophia's cheek pressed against Ethan's back, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing, a rhythm that grounded her amid the whirlwind of the last hour. The helmet, too big for her head, bobbed slightly, the inscription, "Sophia, my light," brushing her temple like a whispered vow. Ethan's mind raced faster than the Harley beneath him, fragments of the past colliding like debris in a storm. He'd left her in that hospital bassinet 13 years ago, deployed to a war that chewed up promises and spat out ghosts. The letters he'd sent from dusty outposts, filled with sketches of the life they'd build. A ranch under wide skies, her laughter echoing through canyons, had gone unanswered, swallowed by the bureaucratic maw of the system. When he returned, scarred and hollow, they told him she'd been placed with a family, her record sealed behind walls of red tape and judgments that branded him a rolling stone, unfit for fatherhood. He'd ridden ever since, chasing horizons that never led home, the Iron Vow his anchor, a crew of misfits who'd traded their own demons for oaths of mutual salvation. Brothers like Noah, the wiry veteran riding shotgun to their left, his prosthetic leg, a silent testament to battles shared, and Jessica, the sharp-eyed mechanic flanking right, her tattooed arms gripping the bars with the ferocity of a guardian angel. As the miles blurred, the convoy veered off the main road onto a gravel track that wound toward the Iron Vow's hidden outpost, a sprawling junkyard compound on the outskirts of a forgotten town called Ember's Edge. Chain-link fences topped with barbed wire loomed into view, illuminated by floodlights that buzzed like angry hornets. The gates creaked open at their approach, swung by a watchman who raised a fist in salute. They rolled to a stop in the central yard, engines cutting off one by one in a cascading hush, leaving only the soft patter of cooling metal and the distant cry of a coyote. Sophia slid off the bike, her legs wobbly, the ground beneath her feet a mosaic of oil stains and scattered tools that gleamed under the stars. Ethan dismounted slowly, his boots thudding against the earth, and knelt to her level, removing the helmet with hands that still trembled faintly. Her eyes, so like her mother's, deep pools reflecting the moonlight, searched his face, a mix of wonder and wariness. "This is your place?" she asked, her voice small against the vastness of the night. He nodded, glancing at the cluster of weathered trailers and workshops that formed their sanctuary. "Ours," he corrected gently, "if you'll have it." The crew gathered loosely, respecting the space, though Noah lingered nearby, his gaze soft with understanding. Jessica hopped off her bike, wiping grease from her hands on a rag, and offered Sophia a bottle of water from a nearby cooler. "Drink up, kid. Long ride shakes the soul loose." Inside the main trailer, lit by the warm glow of hanging lanterns, the air smelled of strong coffee and aged wood. Ethan guided Sophia to a worn couch, its cushions sagging under years of weary bodies finding rest. He poured 2 mugs from a percolator on the stove, the steam rising like fragile hopes. As they sat, the silence stretched, heavy with unspoken questions. Sophia sipped tentatively, her fingers tracing the rim. "Mom, she used to talk about you. Said you were a hero on a big bike, off saving the world." Ethan's throat tightened, the coffee bitter on his tongue. "I was no hero, just a man who made a promise I couldn't keep." He set the mug down, pulling a faded photo from his wallet. Sophia as a newborn, bundled in his arms, his younger face unlined by regret. "I etched your name on that helmet the day you were born. Thought it'd bring me back to you like a compass." Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over as she touched the image. "They said you were gone. Dead, maybe. The foster place." It wasn't home. People came and went, but no one stayed. Her words pierced him sharper than any shrapnel, stirring the old ache of abandonment he'd inflicted without intent. Ethan reached for her hand, calloused fingers enveloping her slender ones. "I searched every lead, every dusty record, hit walls everywhere, officials who turned a blind eye, papers lost in the shuffle, but I never stopped riding toward you." Outside, the crew busied themselves, Noah checking perimeter lights, Jessica tuning a bike's carburetor, their quiet vigilance a shield against the encroaching dark. As the conversation deepened, Sophia's story unfolded in halting fragments, the foster system's cold indifference, the whispers of a town's secret in Dust Haven, where those roughnecks weren't just drifters, but enforcers for someone higher up. "They knew about me," she said, voice dropping. "Said my dad was trouble, that I was better off hidden." Ethan's jaw set, a familiar fire kindling in his chest. Dust Haven's underbelly had long festered with corruption, sheriffs on the take, mills bleeding the land dry, families torn apart for profit. The Iron Vow had skirted its edges before, aiding those the law forgot, but this struck personal. igniting a vow anew, to unearth the truth, to shield what was his by blood and bond. The door swung open, admitting a gust of chill wind, and William, the crew's elder statesman, his silver-streaked beard framing a face etched with wisdom. "Trouble's brewing back in Dusthaven," he rumbled, holding a crumpled note from a scout. "Words out about the girl. They're mobilizing. Want her back under lock and key." Ethan's eyes hardened, the protector in him rising like dawn over the dunes. He stood, pulling Sophia to her feet. "They won't touch her. Not while we ride." The crew assembled in the yard, bikes gleaming under the lights, engines priming with a low growl. Loyalty pulsed among them, a chosen family forged in the crucible of shared scars. Sophia watched them, a spark of belonging flickering in her chest for the first time. As Ethan handed her a spare jacket, too big but warm with the scent of leather and resolve, she slipped it on, stepping into the fold. The convoy reformed under the starlit canopy, headlights flaring like defiant eyes. They roared out of Ember's Edge, bound for Dusthaven's shadowed heart, where promises would clash with power, and a father's redemption would demand every ounce of honor. The road ahead twisted, fraught with moral tempests, but in that thunderous unity, Sophia felt the first true beat of home. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The first hints of dawn bled across the sky like watercolor on parchment, turning the jagged silhouettes of Dusthaven's rooftops into a mosaic of rust and regret. The convoy slowed as they crested the final hill, engines throttling down to a wary murmur, the air thick with the scent of damp earth from an overnight sprinkle and the underlying rot of neglected streets. Dusthaven sprawled below, a town clinging to life by frayed threads, boarded-up shops lining the main drag, the mill's smokestacks belching grey haze into the paling light, and the sheriff's office squatting like a watchful toad at the crossroads. Ethan led the pack, his Harley purring steadily, Sophia's arms wrapped tight around him, her breath warm against his shoulder. The weight of her trust anchored him, a counterbalance to the storm brewing in his gut. They parked in the shadow of an old grain silo on the town's edge, away from prying eyes, the bikes forming a loose semicircle that kicked up faint puffs of dust. The crew dismounted with practiced silence, boots scraping against gravel, hands instinctively checking saddlebags for tools that doubled as defenses. Noah scanned the horizon through binoculars, his one good eye narrowing against the light. "Quiet for now," he muttered to Ethan, passing the lenses. "But that note from last night, scouts say the sheriff's boys are circling wagons, words spread like wildfire in dry grass." Jessica leaned against her bike, polishing a wrench with a rag, her gaze flicking to Sophia. "You holding up, kid? This town's got teeth." Sophia nodded, sliding off the Harley, her borrowed jacket hanging loose like a cape of borrowed courage. The night at Ember's Edge had woven the first threads of connection. Stories shared over cooling coffee, Ethan's rough hand guiding hers through the compound's labyrinth of scrap and solace. But Dusthaven loomed as the unraveling point, the place where her fragmented life had splintered further. "I ran because of them," she said softly, eyes on the distant mill. "The Foster overseers. They weren't kind, said I was a burden, that my file had issues from the start. Those men at the gas station, they weren't random. They worked for Mr. Harlan, the mill boss. He pulls strings here, keeps kids like me out of sight." Ethan's jaw tightened, the name Harlan stirring echoes from old rides. The Iron Vow had crossed paths with types like him before, men who profited from the town's despair, twisting laws into nooses for the vulnerable. Harlan's mill wasn't just timber, it was a front for darker trades, smuggling whispers of exploitation that the sheriff turned blind to for a cut of the take. Ethan's promise to Sophia burned brighter now, not just paternal, but fraternal. binding the crew in a web of shared oaths. He placed a hand on her shoulder, the leather of his glove creaking. "We'll get answers. No more hiding." They moved into town, under the guise of drifters seeking work, splitting into pairs to blend with the early risers, mill hands shuffling to shifts, vendors unlocking stalls with the clank of metal gates. Ethan and Sophia headed for the foster home on Elm Street, a squat brick building with bars on the windows like a cage masquerading as care. The air grew heavier here, laced with the sour tang of overcooked meals and unwashed linens wafting from open doors. As they approached, a curtain twitched in the main office, eyes watching, always watching. Sophia hesitated at the steps, her fingers twisting the jacket's hem. "They'll say I stole, that I'm trouble, but I heard them talking about papers from when I was born, sealed away because of you." Ethan knelt, meeting her gaze level with the cracked sidewalk. Truth has a way of cutting through lies, even if it draws blood. His voice carried the gravel of conviction, honed by years of standing against tides of injustice. Inside, the matron, a wiry woman named Mrs. Ellis, her face pinched like dried fruit, greeted them with feigned surprise, her eyes darting to the door as if expecting reinforcements. "Sophia? Back so soon? And with company?" Ethan's presence filled the narrow hallway, his shadow eclipsing the faded posters of happy families that mocked the walls. "We need her records," Ethan said flatly. "No room for evasion. All of them, the ones that explain why a father was erased." Mrs. Ellis blanched, fumbling for excuses about privacy protocols, but Sophia stepped forward, voice steadying. "I know what you did. The calls you ignored, the visits you blocked. Harlan paid you to keep it quiet, didn't he?" The accusation hung, a spark in dry tinder. The matron's facade cracked, her hands trembling as she pulled a locked drawer. "It's not that simple. The sheriff, he decides what's best for strays like her." Outside, the confrontation escalated without a shot fired. Noah and Jessica had tailed a pair of Harlan's enforcers to the mill's loading docks, where crates stamped with innocuous labels hid deeper sins. A scuffle broke out, fists more than fury, as the crew intervened, pulling the thugs from a terrified warehouse worker who'd witnessed too much. "They take kids for labor," the man gasped, blood trickling from a split lip, the scene suggesting a desperate struggle rather than outright brutality. Harlan's got the sheriff in his pocket, burying complaints under community protection decrees. Word rippled back to Ethan like a shockwave. He stormed out of the foster home with a manila folder clutched tight, forged documents, altered dates, a trail leading straight to Harlan's office. Sophia walked beside him, head high, the folder's weight a tangible link to her stolen years. But as they rendezvoused at the silo, sirens wailed in the distance, closing in like hounds on a scent. The sheriff's cruiser skidded to a halt, lights flashing erratic patterns across the crew's faces. Deputy Harlan, the boss's kin, stepped out, badge glinting falsely under the rising sun. "Bikers causing trouble again? Hand over the girl. She's ward of the state." Ethan stepped forward, the crew flanking him in a line of unyielding resolve, engines idling behind like a dormant thunder. Sophia gripped his arm, whispering, "Don't let them take me back." The dilemma twisted in Ethan's chest. Violence would prove the system's lies true, but retreat meant surrender. "She's no ward," he declared, voice carrying over the din. "She's my daughter. And these papers, they show your corruption, not our crimes." He held up the folder, the wind riffling its edges like pages of judgment. The deputy sneered, hand hovering near his holster, but the crew's presence, 50 souls bound by more than leather, held him at bay. Jessica's eyes locked on his, a silent challenge. Noah's stance spoke of battles won without bullets. Tension coiled, the air electric with the promise of moral collision. In that standoff, under Dusthaven's unforgiving gaze, Ethan's redemption sharpened into a blade of justice. Harlan's web would fray, thread by thread, pulled by the unbreakable vow of a father reclaimed. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows of accountability, the convoy revved to life, a declaration that some promises rode eternal, defying the chains of power. The sun clawed its way higher, bathing the grain silo in a harsh glare that turned the standoff into a tableau of stark contrasts, shadows of the Iron Vow crew stretching long and defiant against the dusty ground, the deputy's cruiser pulsing red and blue like a frantic heartbeat. Ethan stood at the forefront, the manila folder gripped in one hand like a shield, its edges fluttering in the breeze that carried the faint, metallic whiff of the mill's machinery grinding in the distance. Sophia pressed close to his side, her small frame taut with the echo of fear, but her eyes, those fierce, inherited eyes, held a glint of resolve that mirrored his own. The crew formed a human barricade, their leather vests creaking softly, boots planted firm in the gravel, a silent symphony of loyalty that needed no words. Deputy Harlan shifted his weight, his polished boots scuffing the earth, hand still hovering near the holster, as if weighing the cost of drawing iron against 50 souls who'd stared down worse than a badge. Sweat beaded on his brow, not from the warming air, but from the unraveling certainty in his stance. "You think a bunch of scribbles changes anything?" he barked, voice cracking like thin ice. "This town's under my watch. The girl's coming with me, foster orders clear as day." But his eyes betrayed him, flicking to the folder, then to the faces around Ethan, Noah's steady gaze, unblinking as a hawk's, Jessica's fingers twitching near her pocket, where a recorder hummed quietly, capturing every syllable for the truth it might one day demand. Ethan didn't flinch, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife through fog. "Your watch? More like Harlan's leash. These papers don't lie. They show how you buried my daughter's birth records, marked me absent without a fight, all to keep the mill's secrets tidy." He opened the folder with deliberate slowness, pages whispering accusations, altered timestamps from the hospital where Sophia was born, notes from social workers who'd been persuaded to vanish inquiries, a trail of payments funneled through shell accounts to silence the foster system's cracks. Sophia leaned in, scanning the faded ink, her breath catching at the sight of her own name, unredacted for the first time, linking her to the man beside her. "See? You weren't a ghost, Dad. They made you one." The deputy lunged forward a step, face flushing crimson, but William, the silver-bearded elder, stepped up beside Ethan, his presence a mountain of quiet authority. "Easy now, son. We've seen your kind before, badges bought cheap, justice sold by the pound. But this ends today. Hand over the girl peaceful, or we ride this story straight to ears that can't be bought." The crew murmured agreement, a low rumble like distant thunder, their engines idling behind them in a chorus of restrained power. The air thickened, charged with the scent of heated rubber and anticipation, every breath held as the moral scales tipped. Harlan's radio crackled to life, a dispatcher's voice slicing the moment. "Deputy, stand down. Mills on the line. Harlan Sr. wants a word." The colour drained from the deputy's face, his hand dropping from the holster as if burned. He backed toward his cruiser, eyes darting like a cornered animal's. "This ain't over, biker. You'll regret stirring this pot." The door slammed, tires spinning gravel in a frantic spray as he peeled away, leaving a cloud of dust that settled like a veil over the unresolved fray. The crew exhaled collectively, the tension uncoiling but not vanishing, replaced by the sharp tang of victory's edge. Ethan turned to Sophia, kneeling once more to her level, the folder now a bridge between them. "That was just the first wall crumbling. Harlan's the root. Mill boss with hands in every pie, from the sheriff's office to the foster homes. He profited off kids like you, vanishing them into labor that breaks more than bodies." Her nod was small, but the fire in her eyes grew, fueled by the revelation. I remember glimpses, the late nights at the foster place, trucks coming in the dark, kids whispering about debts their families owed. Harlan's name came up once, like a curse. The words hung, weaving her pain into the larger tapestry of Dusthaven's decay, a town where promises were commodities, traded away for scraps of power. As the sun crested fully, gilding the silos in molten light, the crew regrouped around their bikes, the air humming with purpose. Noah unfolded a worn map on his handlebars, tracing routes with a grease-penciled finger, the mill's perimeter, back alleys snaking to Harlan's estate on the hill. "We go in smart," he said, a voice steady as rebar. "No guns, no glory, just truth. I've got a contact inside, a foreman who's tired of the shadows." Jessica nodded, slipping the recorder into her vest. "And I've got the audio from that scuffle at the docks. Ties the enforcers to the warehouse, hints of coercion, enough to make a judge listen if we play it right." Ethan mounted his Harley, helping Sophia up behind him, her arms encircling his waist with a trust that mended old fractures. The engine roared to life beneath them, a vibration that resonated through his chest like a renewed heartbeat. "This ride's for more than us," he told the crew, his words carrying over the growing din. "For every promise the system's broken, every family torn by greed, we stand for the light they tried to snuff." The convoy surged forward, a steel serpent winding through Dusthaven's veins, past weathered homes where curtains twitched with cautious hope, toward the mill's iron gates that loomed like jaws. But as they approached, a figure emerged from the underbrush. A young woman, disheveled and wide-eyed, waving them down. It was Amelia, the warehouse worker from the night before, her clothes still bearing traces of the struggle, face pale but determined. "Wait," she called, voice breathless against the engine's growl. "I saw you at the docks. Harlan's holding a meeting. Tonight his office. Plans to clean house, starting with the girl and anyone who helped her." Her words dropped like stones in still water, rippling new urgency. Ethan killed the engine, the crew circling close, their shadows merging into one protective shroud. Amelia glanced over her shoulder, the mill's hum a constant threat. "I was one of them once, foster kid, pulled into the mill for work release. Escaped last year, but they don't forget. Harlan's got ledgers, hidden ones, showing how he bought silence from the sheriff, even faked deaths for runaways." Sophia's grip tightened on Ethan's jacket, the confession echoing her own buried fears. Ethan met Amelia's gaze, seeing the echo of his own redemptions in her stance. "Join us," he said simply. "Your voice could be the key that unlocks it all." She hesitated, then nodded, climbing onto the back of Jessica's bike, another thread woven into their chosen family. The convoy pressed on, the road curving toward Harlan's hilltop domain, where manicured lawns clashed with the town's grit like a false promise. Dusk gathered early under the mill's pole, stars pricking the sky as they parked in a concealed grove, overlooking the estate's glowing windows. From here, the plan unfolded in hushed tones: infiltrate under cover of night, secure the ledgers, expose the web without a drop of blood spilled. Ethan's heart pounded with the weight of it, not just for Sophia, but for the ghosts of promises he'd carry no more. As the first shadows deepened, the iron vow moved like spectres of justice, bound by oaths that outlasted corruption's grasp. The estate's back trail was a gauntlet of overgrown brambles and flickering security lights, the air heavy with the scent of pine and polished wealth that masked the rot beneath. Sophia stayed with Noah at the perimeter, her sharp eyes a lookout's gift, while Ethan, Jessica, and Amelia slipped toward the study window. Inside, Harlan's voice boomed through the glass, blustery threats to his deputies, plans to frame the bikers as threats to bury Sophia deeper in the system. The ledgers sat on his desk, innocuous volumes that held the town's sins. Ethan's hand on the latch, the moment teetered on redemption's knife edge, the crew's loyalty, the only light in the encroaching dark. If this story is touching your heart, hit that like button to show your support. Moonlight filtered through the canopy of ancient oaks, casting dappled shadows that danced like uneasy spirits across the estate's manicured lawn. The air hung thick with the earthy musk of damp soil and the faint, acrid bite of chimney smoke drifting from Harlan's grand house, a sprawling monument of white columns and shuttered windows that loomed against the night sky like a false idol. Ethan crouched low beside the study window, his breath steady but shallow, the cool glass pressing against his palm as he peered inside. Jessica flanked him to the right, her fingers deft on a slim pry tool, while Amelia hovered at the left, her eyes wide with the ghosts of her own captivity, the faint tremor in her hands betraying the cost of this midnight gamble. Inside, Harlan paced the oak-panelled room, his silhouette bulky and imposing under the glow of a brass lamp, gesturing wildly to two deputies who shifted uncomfortably in leather armchairs. The ledgers, thick, leather-bound tomes, stacked like accusations on the mahogany desk, caught the light, their spines cracked from secrets too heavy to contain. "Those bikers think they can waltz in and upend my operation." Harlan's voice rumbled, laced with the false bravado of a man cornered by his own greed. "Frame 'em for the warehouse mess. Say they roughed up the workers, threatened the girl. Sheriff, you bury the evidence. We'll ship her off to that remote facility up north. No more loose ends." Ethan's blood ran cold, the words slicing through him like barbed wire. Visions flashed. Sophia's small form in that foster cage, her eyes hollowed by years of stolen light, all to feed Harlan's mill, a machine that devoured the vulnerable, churning out profit from silenced pleas. His hand tightened on the window latch, the metal cool and unyielding under his scarred knuckles. Jessica met his gaze, her nod a silent oath, and with a soft click, the latch gave way. The window slid open on well-oiled tracks, admitting a whisper of night air that carried the study's stale scent of cigar smoke and aged paper. They moved like shadows, Ethan first, vaulting the sill with the grace of a man who'd navigated worse than high society traps. His boots muffled against the Persian rug, heart pounding in rhythm with the distant tick of a grandfather clock in the hall. Jessica followed, her wiry frame slipping through effortlessly, while Amelia hesitated at the threshold, the estate's opulence a cruel mirror to the squalor she'd escaped. "This is it," Ethan murmured, voice barely audible over Harlan's tirade. "The truth in those books ends this." He gestured to the desk, but as he stepped forward, a floorboard creaked under his weight, a traitor in the silence. Harlan whirled, his jowly face twisting in shock, eyes bulging like a cornered beast's. "What the— intruders!" The deputies surged to their feet, chairs scraping like nails on chalkboard, hands fumbling for sidearms. Time fractured into a blur of motion. Jessica lunged, tackling the nearer deputy with a shoulder check that sent him sprawling into a bookshelf, volumes tumbling in a cascade of dust and forgotten deals. Ethan dodged the second man's grab, his fist connecting with a solid thud to the jaw, not to maim but to stun, the impact echoing the moral line he refused to cross. No blood for blood. Justice through restraint, the Iron Vows creed etched deeper than ink. Amelia darted to the desk, snatching the top ledger, her fingers trembling as she flipped it open. Pages rustled like dry leaves, revealing columns of names, foster kids like her, Sophia's among them, marked with relocated stamps that hid coerced labor, payments to officials, and fabricated absences. "It's all here," she whispered, voice breaking on the weight of vindication. Harlan backed toward a side door, fumbling for a desk drawer. But Ethan was faster, pinning him against the wall with a forearm across the chest, the man's labored breaths hot against his neck. "Your game's over, Harlan. These ledgers scream louder than your lies." The mill boss's eyes darted, calculating, sweat beading on his brow like dew on a rotting fruit. "You don't understand. These kids, their debts owed. Families defaulted on loans. The system needs workers. I built this town." His plea twisted into defiance, but beneath it lurked the cowardice of a man who'd traded honor for ledgers. Ethan held firm, his voice low and unyielding, carrying the gravel of a father's reclaimed promise. "You built nothing but chains. Sophia's no debt. She's blood, light you tried to snuff for your profit." Outside, the night stirred. Engines rumbling faintly as Noah signaled from the perimeter, Sophia's silhouette a vigilant shadow against the tree line. Jessica secured the deputies with zip ties from her pocket, their grunts muffled by rags. The room now a tableau of subdued chaos, overturned lamps casting erratic glows, papers scattered like fallen leaves of corruption. Amelia stuffed the ledgers into a satchel, her face alight with a fierce redemption, the first true agency she'd claimed since fleeing the mill's grasp. "For all of us," she said, meeting Ethan's eyes, a new bond forging in the heat of the moment. Harlan sagged against the wall, his bluster deflating like a punctured tire. "The sheriff. He'll bury this. You can't touch me." But Ethan knew better. The web was fraying, threads pulled by truths too glaring to ignore. He released Harlan with a shove toward the chair, the man's bulk collapsing in defeat. "We'll see what the light does to shadows like you." As they slipped back through the window, satchel heavy with evidence, the estate's alarms finally wailed, a belated cry, too late to halt the tide. The crew converged in the grove, bikes idling like patient guardians, Sophia rushing to Ethan's side, her arms wrapping around him in a hug that smelled of pine and relief. "Did you get it?" she asked, eyes searching the satchel. He nodded, handing her the top ledger, watching as she traced her name, tears carving clean paths through the night's grime on her cheeks. "We did. This proves everything, the forgeries, the bribes, the lives you stole." Noah revved his engine, the sound a clarion call, while Jessica and Amelia mounted up, the group a tighter knot now, Amelia's addition sealing their chosen family with unspoken vows. William brought up the rear, his grizzled face set in approval, the convoy peeling away from the estate in a thunderous exodus, headlights slicing the dark like blades of dawn. The road back to Ember's Edge wound through canyons that echoed their roar, the wind whipping tales of triumph from their leathers. But Ethan felt the undercurrent of unfinished business, the sheriff's reach, Harlan's connections, the system's inertia that wouldn't yield without a fight. Sophia leaned against his back, her voice cutting through the rush. "What now, Dad? They won't just let this go." He glanced over his shoulder, the stars wheeling above like witnesses to their path. "We expose it. Ride to the state capitol, hand the ledgers to honest eyes, reporters, advocates who've fought these fights before. Your light, Sophia, it guides us now." As the compound's lights flickered into view, a sanctuary amid the wilds, the weight of the night settled into resolve. The iron vow had claimed another soul from the abyss, their promises interlocking like chain links, unbreakable against the storm. Harlan's empire teetered, but the true battle loomed. A moral reckoning that would test loyalties, unearth buried pains, and forge a legacy of justice from the ashes of betrayal. Under the vast desert sky, father and daughter rode into the promise of tomorrow, engines humming the anthem of redemption earned mile by scarred mile. The first rays of false dawn pierced the eastern horizon, painting the canyon walls in hues of bruised purple and fleeting gold as the convoy thundered toward Ember's Edge. Engines growled in unison, a relentless symphony that drowned out the night's lingering echoes, the wind slicing through the riders like a cleansing blade. Ethan felt Sophia's arms locked around his waist, her cheek pressed to the leather of his jacket, the steady rhythm of her breathing a fragile anchor amid the rush. The satchel of ledgers bounced against his thigh, strapped secure to the bike's frame, its weight a tangible promise, of truths unearthed, of chains about to shatter. Behind them, the iron vow stretched in formation, Jessica and Amelia riding tandem, the new ally's posture straightening with each mile, as if the road itself were mending her fractures. Noah scouting ahead, his silhouette cutting sharp against the paling sky. William anchoring the rear, his grizzled vigilance a bulwark against pursuit. The compound's gates loomed welcoming yet wary, floodlights humming to life as the watchman swung them open with a metallic groan. Gravel crunched under tires as the bikes filed in, engines cutting off in a staggered hush that left the air ringing with the soft ticks of cooling metal and the distant hoot of an owl, bidding farewell to the dark. Sophia dismounted first, her legs unsteady on the uneven ground, the scent of sagebrush and engine oil grounding her as she turned to Ethan. "We really have it, proof that could change everything." Her voice carried a tremor of hope, eyes reflecting the compound's lanterns like stars reclaimed from the void. Ethan nodded, unhooking the satchel and cradling it like a sacred relic. "More than proof, it's the map to their downfall. Names, dates, the bribes that kept the sheriff's mouth shut and the foster doors locked." He led her toward the main trailer, the crew dispersing with purposeful murmurs. Noah to secure the perimeter, Jessica to stash the bikes in the shadowed bays. Amelia lingered, her gaze sweeping the junkyard haven, the scattered hulks of rusted vehicles, workshops aglow with welding sparks, trailers that stood as testaments to lives rebuilt from scrap. "This place, it's like a fortress of second chances," she said softly, falling into step beside Sophia. "I never thought I'd find one after the mill." Inside the trailer, the air warmed with the aroma of fresh brewed coffee and the faint, comforting tang of gun oil from the crew's quiet preparations. Ethan spread the ledgers across the scarred oak table, pages fanning open under the hanging bulb's harsh light. Sophia traced the entries with tentative fingers, her name jumping out amid columns of cold calculations. Relocation fee, $5 Harlan Industries. Nearby, entries for other children, faded ink marking debt settled or ward transferred, painted a ledger of lost innocences. The mill's hunger laid bare. This one, Lily, she was at the foster home with me. They said she ran away, but here it says, indentured placement. What does that even mean? Sophia's voice cracked, the weight of shared suffering pressing down. Ethan's hand covered hers, calluses rough against her skin, a bridge across the years of absence. It means Harlan turned kids into commodities, trading futures for his empire. The sheriff signed off on it all, calling it protection under some twisted local code. But we expose this, and it crumbles, the whole rotten core. His eyes, shadowed by the lamp's glow, held a father's fire, tempered by the scars of wars, both foreign and intimate. Outside, the compound stirred, William barking low orders to reinforce the fences, the clank of chains and the whir of generators underscoring their fragile sanctuary. Jessica entered, wiping sweat from her brow, her tattooed arms flexing as she set down a battered laptop. "Got a secure line to an old contact? Reporter up in the capital, the kind who chews through corruption like it's candy. She'll verify the docs, get them to the right eyes, state investigators, maybe even a federal watchdog if it stinks bad enough." Amelia leaned in, her face paling as she pointed to a page. "That's my signature, forged, when they pulled me in at 14. Said it was community service, but it was 16-hour shifts in the warehouses. No pay, no way out." The confession hung, weaving her into the fold, her voice gaining steel. "I want in on the ride to deliver this. Harlan took my youth. I want to see him face what he built on it." Sophia looked up, a spark of solidarity igniting in her chest. "Me too. If we're family now, I ride with you." Ethan met her gaze, the word family resonating like a vow renewed, echoing the oaths that bound the iron vow. He'd lost too much to doubt it, his wife to a quiet hospital bed, his brother to desert sands, his daughter to ink and indifference. But here, in this ramshackle heart of the wilds, redemption pulsed alive. You both will. But first we rest. Dawn's breaking and Harlan won't sit idle. Scouts say his men are mobilizing. Whispers of roadblocks and false warrants to drag us back. As the crew gathered, mugs steaming in calloused hands, stories flowed like the coffee. Tales of past rides, of promises kept against odds steeper than these canyons. Noah shared a scarred laugh over a botched border run that saved a migrant family. William recounted a standoff with a crooked judge, won not by force, but by unyielding truth. Sophia listened, the lantern light softening the edges of her fear, the jacket around her shoulders now feeling like armor. Ethan watched her, the girl who'd called him Dad, and cracked his world open. Her presence mending fractures he thought permanent, but peace fractured with the crackle of a radio on the table. Noah's, tuned to local frequencies. A dispatcher's voice cut through, urgent and edged. All units, be advised, biker gang sighted near Dusthaven perimeter. Suspected involvement in estate breach. Approach with caution, Harlan's orders. The room stilled, the air thickening with the scent of impending storm. Ethan's jaw set, the ledgers snapping shut like a judge's gavel. They're coming, pack light, we ride at first light, straight to the capital. No detours, no mercy for their lies. The crew moved with honed efficiency, saddlebags filling with essentials. The satchels of evidence, maps etched with evasion routes, water skins against the desert's thirst. Sophia helped Jessica strap down the laptop, their hands brushing in a gesture of budding sisterhood. Amelia checked her borrowed helmet, the inscription on its side, "Iron vow, stand true," a mantra that steadied her pulse. Ethan pulled Sophia aside near the door, the cool pre-dawn air nipping at their skin. "I left once before, but this time I'm fighting for the life we build. Your light, kid. It's what pulls me through." She hugged him fiercely, the embrace carrying the faint wildflower scent of her hair, mingled with leather and resolve. "Then let's make them see it." As the sky lightened to a pale wash, engines priming in the yard with low rumbles, the convoy formed under the compound's watchful lights. Harlan's shadow loomed, his enforcers closing the noose, but the iron vow rode as one, a thunder of loyalty, promises forged in fire, barreling toward a reckoning that would illuminate Dusthaven's darkest corners. The road ahead twisted with peril, moral tempests brewing, yet in that unified roar, father and daughter glimpsed the horizon of justice, unbroken and eternal. The first true light of dawn broke over the canyons like a reluctant confession, gilding the jagged rims in soft amber as the Iron Vow convoy surged from Ember's edge. Engines thundered in a unified roar, a defiant pulse against the encroaching chill, tires chewing gravel into a wake of dust that swirled like vengeful spirits. Ethan led the charge, his Harley cutting the lead with Sophia's arms anchored around him, her warmth a steady flame against the morning's bite. The satchel of ledgers strapped to his side bounced rhythmically, each jolt a reminder of the truths it carried, names etched in betrayal, bribes that had silenced cries, the mill's hidden hunger for innocence. Behind them, the crew rode tight, Jessica and Amelia weaving in sync, the newer rider's posture now fierce with purpose, Noah scouting the flanks, his eyes scanning the horizon for shadows. William's bike rumbling steady at the rear, a grizzled sentinel warding off the rear-view ghosts of pursuit. The road twisted through scrubland, sagebrush blurring into a green haze under the rising sun, the air sharp with the scent of dew-kissed earth and the faint, oily tang of exhaust. Sophia's voice rose above the wind, tentative yet clear. "What if they stop us? The sheriff's got roadblocks, checkpoints. Harlan's reach is long." Ethan glanced back, his helmet's visor reflecting her determined face, the inscription, "Sophia, my light," a talisman against doubt. "They'll try. But we've got the light on our side now. These ledgers burn brighter than their badges. We ride straight, no veering, to the Capitol's doors. Justice doesn't come easy, but it comes true." His words carried the weight of oaths renewed, the gravel in his tone softened by the paternal bond that had bridged their lost years. Miles unfurled like chapters closing, the desert giving way to sparse towns where early risers paused at diner windows, coffee mugs frozen mid-sip as the convoy thundered past, a steel river of resolve. Whispers followed, iron vow, up to something big. But no sirens yet, only the hum of tension building like static before a storm. Amelia, gripping Jessica's waist, leaned forward, her breath ragged against the rush. "I keep seeing the mill's gates in my head, kids like me, shadows in the warehouses. This makes it real, doesn't it? Ending it." Jessica's reply was a firm nod, her voice cutting through the wind. "Real as the road under us. Harlan built his throne on broken backs. We're toppling it with paper and truth." As the sun climbed, casting long shadows that danced across the asphalt, the first blockade appeared. A sheriff's cruiser idling across a narrow bridge, lights flashing like false warnings, flanked by 2 more vehicles. Deputy Harlan himself stood beside it, arms crossed, his face a mask of smug authority under the brim of his hat. The convoy slowed to a halt, engines idling to a menacing purr, dust settling in heavy clouds that choked the air with the scent of heated brakes and confrontation. Ethan killed his bike first, boots hitting the ground with a thud that echoed his resolve. Sophia dismounting beside him, her small frame straight as rebar. The crew fanned out, a wall of leather and loyalty, hands visible but eyes unyielding. "You again!" the deputy snarled, stepping forward, his hand resting on his belt near the holster. "State lines closed for maintenance. Turn back, or we'll make it official. Trespassing, aiding a runaway." His gaze flicked to the satchel, greed and fear warring in his eyes. Ethan unstrapped it slowly, the leather creaking like a judge's gavel, and held it out, not in surrender but revelation. "Official? Like the bribes in here, or the forgeries that stole my daughter?" Harlan's ledgers tell a different story, one of corruption that runs from your office to his mill. Sophia stepped up, voice steady, despite the pounding in her chest. "You signed my file yourself, erased my dad to keep the secrets quiet, but no more." The deputy faltered, his bluster cracking as Noah and Jessica advanced, the latter holding up her phone, the recorder's red light blinking like an accusatory eye. "We've got it all on tape, from the docks, the estate. Your voice, deputy, tying knots in the noose." William's deep rumble added weight. "Stand down. This goes to the Capitol clean, or we broadcast every dirty deal before breakfast." The air thickened, the bridge's metal groaning faintly under the sun's heat, the river below murmuring indifference to the standoff. Harlan's men shifted, uncertainty rippling through their ranks, badges heavy when truth stares back. The deputy raised a hand, signaling retreat, his face ashen as he backed toward his cruiser. "This'll cost you." But his threat dissolved in the engine's growl as the convoy pressed forward, the blockade parting like mist before the dawn. No shots, no fists, just the power of exposure, moral gravity pulling the corrupt aside. Sophia's laugh bubbled up, light and freeing, cutting through the wind as they accelerated. "We did it. They're running." Ethan's chest swelled, the road ahead straightening into promise, the scars of absence fading in the light of her joy. By midday, the Capitol's spires rose on the horizon, a bastion of glass and stone where justice wore suits instead of leather. They rolled into the advocacy center's lot, bikes lining up like sentinels, the crew dismounting amid the curious stares of passers-by. The reporter, a sharp woman named Grace, with eyes that pierced like sunlight, met them at the doors, her office a hive of ringing phones and stacked files. Ethan handed over the satchel, the transfer a solemn rite, Sophia standing tall beside him. "This exposes it all," he said. The mill, the sheriff, the lives twisted for profit. Make it count. Grace flipped through the pages, her expression hardening into resolve. It will. Federal eyes are on cases like this, exploitation rings disguised as charity. Harlan's done, indictments by week's end. As she coordinated with investigators, the crew waited in the lobby, the air cool with the scent of fresh print and determination. Amelia hugged Sophia, their embrace a seal on shared survival. We broke the cycle. Hours later, confirmations came, raids on the mill, arrests rippling through Dusthaven like shockwaves, the sheriff's office stripped bare. Back on the road that evening, the return ride felt lighter, the sun dipping low in a sky streaked with victory's gold. Ember's edge welcomed them with open gates, the compound alive with the crew's quiet cheers, mugs raised in toasts to promises kept. Ethan and Sophia sat on the trailer's steps, watching stars emerge, her head on his shoulder. "You came back," she whispered. "Not just for me, but because you promised." He squeezed her hand, the desert wind whispering approval. "And I'll keep riding that promise every mile. Family's what we choose, kid, stronger than any chain." In the days that followed, headlines bloomed. Dusthaven corruption crumbles, Foster scandal unearthed. Harlan faced bars, his empire dust, the mill repurposed for real aid. Sophia enrolled in school nearby, her laughter echoing through the compound, a light undimmed. The iron vow grew, oaths binding new souls, their rides now legends of quiet justice. Ethan etched a new inscription on his helmet beside her name, forever vowed. Under endless skies, father and daughter forged ahead, redemption's road stretching infinite, honor their eternal engine. Thank you for joining us on this journey of promises reclaimed and justice won. If these stories of courage and family touch your soul, please subscribe for more tales from the road and hit the notification bell to ride with us every time.